Salutations, respected viewers. This is George from Ireland. So, in this video, I wish to talk about the personality of Mr. Benjamin Shapiro. I've watched quite a few of his videos, and I'm sometimes mightily impressed with him. Obviously, I see some lacunae in his arguments. I've learned what his tactics are. One of them is speaking exceedingly quickly, and some people mistake that for intelligence or reason. Now, he's an erudite chap, but his arguments don't always hold water. He is, with the best will in the world, a square. I hope it's not too prejudicial. He might even admit to that himself, even though it's a pejorative term. He doesn't come across as fun. He seldom smiles, perhaps only if he thinks that he's belittled somebody else. He never laughs that I've seen, and I've seen scores of his videos. He appears to be humorless, very full of his own importance, and he is quite an important chap. He's cut a swathe through social media. He's a household name. He's had millions of views on certain videos of his. He's certainly not objective, but okay, he's a provocateur to some extent. He's partisan, advancing a particular agenda, and all right, I am as well. I like to think I'm not as partisan as he is. So necessarily he's selective in the information he chooses to disclose or the emphasis he places on things in his videos. It's all about argumentation with him. So he's not there to inform people. And as he has said himself, one of his key strategies is to demean others, speaking in scathing tones, making caustic comments about others, saying stupid dumbass and so on. And I thought such an unmannerly approach surely doesn't mean that people should take him more seriously. He is all about being respectable, but he's not very respectful towards others. He gives no quarter, ungentlemanly towards his opponents. One ought to try to be chivalrous, but I know that doesn't get views. I mean, he's got an awful lot more views than I ever shall. Why is that? Well, he does this sort of thing for a living. Let me see, he edits the videos, there are clips in here and there, and I don't have the technical know-how or the patience to sort that out. And he appeals to a certain demographic. People buy into his credo, and by pushing that agenda, being very one-sided, that appeals to a certain group. This is our identity, we all believe the same. Whereas people who strive to be more even-handed, to observe lacunae in their own argument, to acknowledge some of the merits in the arguments of the other side, that's less stimulating to watch. It's certainly like not throwing red meat to your supporters. So his speeches are verbal adrenaline for some of his acolytes. But he comes across as dislikable to me, I'm afraid, even leaving aside his views. Often whining, very self-righteous, judgmental, sneering, fault-finding. He's wrathful. He's got a saturnine and choleric personality. He appears to be Victorian, with his whalebone corseted moral authoritarianism, very much disapprove of people having children outside of wedlock. Now, why would unwed pregnancy and indeed birth be such an immoral thing? I mean, it doesn't have to harm anyone, including the child. It can be brought up by two loving parents or indeed one loving parent. I agree that two parents is usually better than one. Depends on the parents. Hedonism rankles with him. It doesn't with me. I mean, I don't know if he ever drinks alcohol. He's never alluded to it. Certainly wants severe penalties for people dealing drugs, which surely militates against his free market views. You can't buck the market, as Margaret Thatcher might say. So his prejudices are barnacled onto him, I suppose. I like to think I don't have prejudices, but I may delude myself. He appears to dislike gays, talking about lesbian dance theory, and the contempt in his voice was just unmissable. That hinted to me of latent homophobia. Now, I know he's talking about Mickey Mouse subjects, and there are some ridiculous courses taught in higher education, but why would a lesbian dance theory be better than just dance theory? Sorry, be worse than a hetero one. And I know dance is not a scholastic subject, so oughtn't be awarded a degree. Sorry, I know people who've got degrees in dancing, or kinesthesiology, perhaps I ought to call it. I know it's a very impressive gift, and I have no virtuosity for dance. I'm bewildered all of those who do, but it's not academic. He seems to express disdain and hostility for those who wish to palliate the suffering of others. And I think that's probably the most loathsome thing about him. The minimum wage, absolutely mustn't have that. That would tank the economy, even though there are numerous examples where that's not the case. It can even be a boon. I realise the minimum wage could be too high. but wages certainly can be too low. Or perhaps you think living off like a cent a day would be acceptable in the United States. But nobody would work for that. Well, the moment they have a choice. You may know until the 1860s, some people in America had to work for no money whatsoever. I know they got fed, but surely that was too liberal. No, I'm being unfair. He doesn't speak up for slavery, though he gets his morals from the Old Testament, which says that slavery is entirely righteous. Publicly funded healthcare, and he thinks that is a work of the devil, it would appear. So he must obviously revile Israel, a country of which he's a stalwart defender, or very few restrictions on firearms. Now, here I acknowledge that he is a little bit balanced. He recognises there's a certain nuance to the issue, and there can be subtlety to him, saying that he would recognise that if you ban almost all guns, such as is the case in the United Kingdom, that would reduce gun deaths quite a bit. So Mr. Shapiro boasted that he was a virgin until marriage. But is that as bad as boasting of conquests? I mean, not doing something isn't much of an achievement, is it? So was his virginity even an accomplishment? Maybe it wasn't a choice. I wouldn't say that Mr. Shapiro was one for the national stud. I might say I'm not either. But I can't imagine much sweet talking from Mr. Shapiro. I wonder what his chat-up lines would be like. So there we are. I mean, any idiot can remain a virgin, and he's certainly not an idiot. But seducing lots of people, well, that can be hard work, particularly if you're a boy, a straight boy like me. For ladies, well, us boys, we tend to be less fussy about this. So being a temptress is not that challenging. He calls socialists selfish. I thought, wow, that takes real chutzpah, as in wanting to have a system which would provide for those who are indigent, to try and reduce privation. Now, you might say there's not real poverty in the United States because nobody actually starves to death, and very few people are homeless. They're homeless sometimes by choice, or they're alcoholics or drug addicts and so on, ex-cons. So there might be some relative poverty, and this could be radically reduced, as you'll see in many Western European countries. Now, socialists can be selfish if they just want to live off welfare and not contribute. So, yeah, there are flaws with it, and I don't believe in socialism. There's certain aspects of socialism, in particular areas of life, which I think are apposite and laudable. You can see my other videos where I expound my views on that one. So, to be fair to Mr. Shapiro, I must pay him credit where he's owed it. He comes across as unaffected, sincere. I think he believes of most of what he says. I suspect sometimes he's saying, well, how can I really appeal to my audience? Because if someone is like me and looks into things in perhaps greater depth, and acknowledges that there are some worthwhile arguments on both sides of an issue, that it's not that clear-cut, that one doesn't have to go all the way in one direction, or that you might only go part of the way on authoritarianism, or you might only go part of the way on whatever it is, libertarianism or tax cuts or something, then that's too complicated for some people. They want it clear-cut and black and white, and I'm saying it's usually not that straightforward. The truth is usually complex. So he's a highly partisan person. Family values is everything to this gentleman. I'm not a family values person myself, and his wife, this chap S, she shares his ethno-religious group, as he's noted. So identity politics, it's something he decries in others, but surely he's fallen a victim to it himself. He never tires of reminding us that he's of the Judaic faith and of the Hebraic race, and nothing wrong with that. And unfortunately, he's been monstered by some bigots who are against him, and Judeophobia is nauseating. No one should be mistreated for his or her ethnicity or religious belief. So he is a Zionist, and it can be a respectable point of view. He wears his Zionism along with his phylacteries. Obviously, there's some Zionists, there's some Jewish people who are anti-Zionists who believe that Israel shouldn't exist. Indeed, ultra-Orthodox Jewish people, a few of them believe that. But I disagree with him sometimes on this. I think he's just too blinkered when it comes to his advocacy for Israel. I think he's devoid of racial prejudice there. He's talking about the occupation of the Gaza Strip. Well, not much of it anymore. The West Bank, but and surely that's land thievery. And he takes a very firm line on immoral behaviour, but thinks that this is acceptable. Well, see what the International Court of Justice of the United Nations has to say about it. These would be the authorities to turn to. I mean, They created Israel, the United Nations, in 1948. I'm sure you say, no, we created it ourselves. But the Israeli government often points out its legitimacy as being one of the only sovereign states created by the UN, and therefore it's more legitimate than any other. So you can't have it both ways, cite the UN as an authority and say they've got no standing here. Now, I know Mr. Shapiro himself doesn't say that it's because of the UN that Israel was created. I don't think this chap is an Israeli citizen, though I could be mistaken on that issue. He seems to think that most Muslims are infernal. In one of his videos, he demolishes this specious notion that it's a moderate Muslim majority. Rather depends what you think is moderate. And indeed, there are some rebarbative views which are shockingly widespread amongst the worldwide Muslim community. So he takes their prisoners and he tells it like it is, as he would say, he's unafraid to tell people these uncomfortable truths. I think when he's really been foolish is claiming that global warming is probably not happening and disbelieving in science. Now, I gave up all scientific subjects at 15. Perhaps it shows. So to some extent, I have to take these things on trust. I don't fully comprehend these things, or, I believe the theory of evolution. I've not read on the origin species of all that. So perhaps I'm unwise and I ought to apprise myself of this book. If I haven't read it, I can't possibly believe in it, having read only a précis. It'd be a fair criticism. Facts do not care about your feelings. That's perhaps his most famous meme, and that's my go down in history. I suspect this is an expression that will survive him. And indeed, facts do not care two hoots for your sentiments. Global warming is going to happen, whether you like it or not, whether you like to pretend it's not the case, whether this datum that comes out every year about global temperature going up almost constantly is to your liking or not. Whether you care to believe it or not, it's happening. To what degree is it anthropogenic? Now, okay, that is debatable. Maybe human activity is only a small part of it, but I think it's almost beyond argument that human activity does contribute to it. That's just irrefragable. So I remember he was particularly unwise. All right, perhaps I shouldn't mince my words so much, asinine in saying global warming raising the sea levels 10 feet wouldn't matter at all. Now, I think he might know what happens to ice when the temperature goes up, how it's going to melt, and that's why it's going to go up. So that's why things will be underwater. And you can just sell your home and move, even if your home is under the deep. And who is going to pay to live in that? Well, perhaps Mr. Shapiro would like to pay to buy a house which is underwater. And moreover, in English law, I'm not sure in the United States, private individuals cannot own below the high tide mark. So you couldn't sell it anymore. And who would purchase this? Perhaps we better grow gills for this time. Some countries, like the Maldives, would be underwater back then. Well, be like the Dutch, the boy who put his finger in the dike, build up dikes. That might be an option. So he occasionally says things which are ill-advised. He appears to have not really thought through. So I suspect his character informs his opinion somewhat, because there is a crossover between personality and opinion. Now, but if you grew up in a certain society, brought up as a communist, for instance, those of a certain personality type will believe in that because they're credulous people. They tend to want to be in the majority, to follow the crowd. They are unduly respectful of authority. And these same people, if they're grown up in the United States, would be Republicans for similar reasons, because I think that is the most hardline expression of national identity, because it's about patting your country on the back and assuming that your political economic system is the best in the world. There's an element of national chauvinism to it. There is this tug in the forelock to the powers that be, militarism and things like that. So it's scintillating how to see how people of the same personality type can develop radically dissimilar political opinions depending on the milieu in which they grow up. So that's what I often wonder about personality. To what extent is it reasoning has led you there? And to what degree is it just your psychology has led you there? So that's why I try not to hold views too strongly and try not to go all the way. You don't always have to hang around the middle. The truth isn't always in the middle. There is a bandwagon effect, and just because most people believe whatever it is, that does not of itself make it right, or indeed wrong. So one should constantly strive to be right and to have one's opinions supported by empirical evidence. And I ought to do better on this myself, delving into statistics. And Mr. Shapiro has a gift for digging up information which is supportive of the case that he wishes to propound He often expatiates on the iniquities of social justice warriors, and sometimes he's on the money. And I think I agree with him on the notion that white privilege is largely bogus. But I suspect he goes a little too far sometimes, overstating his case, suggesting that there's not one iota of meritorious argument on the other side. So if you were to do that, it would be bland. It would be too complicated for the average viewer to follow. And anyway, that's why he's going to get an awful lot more hits than I ever do.